Lavender Rose's black cat, and I will be telling some scary stories tonight that'll get you going for Halloween. We did ones in the woods, we did ones with trucks. This one is in one of the scariest places, Cornfields. You've heard of scary cornfield stories, I'm sure. And these just happen to be true stories of people's experiences. I know things about cornfields. Being a cat and all, I go there quite often. This first spooky cornfield story is from a Frank Simcoe who had the midnight shift. This happened in the summer of 2004 in a cheese factory in Minnesota. This happened while he was on a break. And this factory looks out over a cornfield, and he was checking out the bats, like I would if I was there. And this is what he says. As I was watching the bats, I looked down at the edge of the cornfield. Something was moving there. It was the size of a small child, and very, very skinny and pale. It was something that looked like a head of straight black hair. It moved in a sort of jerky gait, like someone dancing the robot badly. It moved in chunks, legs, then the hips, then the torso and shoulders and neck, and finally, head. It was looking back into the cornfield, or at least I felt like it was. I thought it was a heron at first, but it looked too much like a person. It didn't move like a person. Gradually, step by step, it moved toward me. Letting my curiosity better my fear, I moved toward the edge of the dock, which was raised a few feet off the ground. When I got within a few feet of the edge, the thing looked at me. I was paralyzed. I could have ran, but I was stuck somewhere between terrified and intrigued. It moved its face, still pointed at me. It ratcheted its body in that disconcerting, jerky movement toward the cornfield and went into the cornfield. I tried to watch where the field moved where it was walking past, but the corn remained perfectly still. I noticed that all of the crickets were silent. I stood there for over an hour, but it never came back. I never saw it again. And Frank, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think I would want to see it again. That's just me. Jennifer Lozano from Indiana has the next story. She said that she lived with her mother and stepfather when she was younger, on the top of a small hill in the middle of nowhere, overlooking acres and acres of cornfields and woods. This happened when she went exploring. Incident happened when she went out exploring by the cornfield and the woods. She walked some distance out along the silent cornfield where it bumped up against and kissed the woods, and that's where she saw it first. She says, I was walking back and I caught a flash of something, all black, move behind a tree in the woods. I stopped and looked at first. I didn't see anything, so I began walking again. But after a few steps, I seen it again. And this time, it didn't try to hide. What I saw was not only unexplainable, but pure evil in a form. It stood there, looking at me, and its head and neck hung to the side in a very abnormal way, as if it was broken. It stood about 4 feet tall, and its arms were very long and hung all the way to the ground. It looked as if its entire body was burnt, or very thick like skin, and it had no hair or ears on its head. Then I noticed steam was rolling off this thing like crazy, and then it let out this loud scream. That scared me so badly, I began to run full speed through the fields toward the house. I felt as if my heart was going to beat out of my chest, and I could hear the leaves crunching from this thing chasing after me. I looked over my shoulder, and it was gaining speed. It was using its long arms like a gorilla would. All this time, it let out this gurgling sort of scream that I can't explain. I ran into the house and telling my mom what happened, and even before I was finished, it was pounding on the door outside of the house. We were both screaming and crying. I would be too. After an hour of this tormenting us, it just all stopped. When my dad got home later, we told him, and we were sure he wouldn't believe us. But to our surprise, he got several other people, and they hunted this thing, but they never found it. About a year later, my dad and I were talking about it, and he said that 2 days before my sighting, he was burning leaves out back in the yard by the cornfield. And in the middle of the field, he saw it standing there, and it screamed like a banshee. Also, there were at least seven other sightings that year of this thing in the woods. This next story, and that was a scary one. This next story is more of perhaps a different type of story, not a creature story, but perhaps a ghost story. This Reddit poster said that he and some kids, along with his friend's mom, who was the driver, were all driving in central Illinois on their way to Chicago in a van. They had been driving along a remote stretch of I-55 that passes through rows of cornfields as far as the eye can see. And this happened in the midnight hour, of course, right? Now here's what he said. It was really late and everyone was asleep except for me and my friend's mom, of course, because she was driving the car. I was sitting on the right side in the back when we passed by what looked like two teenagers coming out of the cornfield, the right side of the road. The strange thing is how they looked. I will never forget the boy. He was probably 15 or 16 years old, and he wore a white linen shirt and brown pants with suspenders. His hair was short and curly brown. He was handsome and pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he had blood on him. and the girl he was with looked bad. She was wearing a blood-soaked dress. She was also pale, with dark circles under her eyes. I know there is a... Right, okay, here I am. I had to find the right spot. My friend's mom freaked out, thinking the kids drove their car into the cornfield and had an accident. And they got super hurt. We were driving fast and had kids in the van, so she didn't pull over, but called 911 and gave the mile marker. We never knew what the police found, but I honestly think they were ghosts, is what he said. Their movements was strange, and their placement was just odd. And they weren't running out screaming, saying, "Help, help," right? They were just walking. Of course, one would say if they were in shock, maybe they wouldn't be doing anything other than walking, but kind of, that'd be one thing you'd want to find out about if they were just, because if they were actually real, you just passed them by, you know. But she gave the mile marker, so. This next story is also kind of a ghostly one. A house ghost, a ghost house. This story was told on Ghost Tales, the Ghost Tales. Okay. When I was a kid, around 12, my buddy and I used to play in a cornfield. How fun that would be. It was our favorite place to play. So we knew this area very well. We had been going there since we were in the 2nd grade. Anyway, keeping in mind, this is just a huge cornfield. I'd estimate it was about 1.5 miles from one end to the other. So we walked out there and found a house. But there was never a house there before. The lights were on in this house, and it looked like it had been there for years. We freaked out and ran home. And when we finally got the nerve to go there a few days later, well, it was just gone. Now, of course, that could be several things, right? That could be like a remnant of a house that had been there a long time ago. Sometimes things like that just kind of appear every once in a while. Could be that there's a house in another alternate reality there. Who knows? That would be weird. Now, this next one, supposedly true, but you know how you have those stories where, you know, they're sort of like, you know, this happened a long time ago, so we don't know what the, you know, actually happened. I'm not saying it didn't. It's just one of those stories that you think you would see in a movie, you know. And you're like, could that really happen? I'm not saying it couldn't. But here we go. It's more of like a campfire tale or a slumber party ghost story. Here we go. This is by Jen of Edmonton in the USA. I think they said Illinois. I don't know. Somewhere like that. I titled it The Killer Scarecrow. That's not what she titled it. This happened a long time ago on a farm in Edmonton. 2 brothers lived with their grandparents, and every day they had to work in the cornfields. But of course, always crowded, the crows always try to get the corn, so the 2 brothers had to find a way to, you know, remedy that. One day, one of the brothers suggested they should make a scarecrow. So they got to work. They named him Harold. after their old neighbor who died. The two boys laughed as they made Harold's black beady eyes and his evil grin. They set him up in the field, and satisfied, they walked away. That night, however, the two brothers were both bothered by strange noises coming from outside. One of them joked, "It's just Harold." But after a while, they both fell back to sleep again. The next morning, they found Harold leaning up against their bedroom window. But they convinced each other that it was just the wind that knocked him there. This happened for the next 3 nights. They'd wake up every morning to find Harold in a different place every time. They started getting spooked. One day, the two brothers were walking to the pasture to milk the cows when they noticed they forgot the milking stool. None of them wanted to go back to the barn to get the stool, because they had to pass by the cornfield, which was across from the barn. The older one finally said, "Okay, I will do it." The younger one waited at the pasture for about half an hour before he headed back to search for his brother. As he neared the barn, he heard a thumping noise, and he looked up to the barn roof where the noise had come from. And there was Harold, the scarecrow, trotting around a dead, torn up body, drying in the sun. And they never said the body was his brother, but who else would it be? Harold was a naughty scarecrow. I know I've said things before about having visions and things. And one night, this isn't any Cornfield story, but I woke up, and I was fully awake, so still had my eyes closed, but I was awake, and I saw a tavern, and there were two guys, and they had like the beaver hats and everything else on, so I'm gonna guess this was like early to mid 1800s, late 1700s, but somewhere in that time frame. And I even saw like the serving winch back in the background, and I was seeing all this, and I'm thinking these were actually people back in those days, and they didn't look any unlike the people of these days, except they were wearing different clothes, right? But the guys, the two guys that were drinking their ale or whatever they called it over there, they had I couldn't hear what they were saying, because it was like I was seeing the picture, the memory, the remnant of something, but I wasn't able to hear it. But I could tell what they were talking about and laughing about, but they were up to no good. And then, like months and months later, I woke up to see the one that freaked me out the most staring at me, also evil, but he was just him. Don't know why I thought of that, but anyway, I wish everyone a very safe and scary Halloween tomorrow. Or should I say, by the time I have this on, it will be later than Halloween. And don't get any of us black cats. We're all good. Don't be so superstitious. And Rare. Over now. Happy Halloween.